You are listening to the Michael Yaffee Show here at wnsc.ucf.edu online radio. I thank you for joining me once again on this sort of cloudy, dreary, hurricane coming Monday. If you're wondering who I am, I'm just a regular rank UCF student that they allow to have a microphone. You know, during the show, I can actually give my opinions and stuff. And usually, it's a little different. I usually talk about the news of the day, important events, politics, stuff like that. And if you have anything to say, to respond to anything I'm saying, you can instant message me during the show at Radio WNSC. Or if you want to send me an email, you can send me an email at michael.yaffee@knights.ucf.edu. And yeah, so let's just get started. I'm here, by the way, I'm here every Monday, 6:30 to 7:30, and every Saturday, 2 to 3 p.m. And, well, today is an important anniversary. Today is one of the... Well, it was celebrated in Germany. Today is the anniversary of the taking down of the Berlin Wall. The taking down of the Berlin Wall, where the people of East Germany were liberated from the tyranny of the Soviet Union back in the early 90s. And I'm going to focus a lot on this today because I think it's an important part of history that we need to focus on. There are many leaders who are a part of this. There was something the college Republicans today they played in the student union. They played the Ronald Reagan speech where he says, "Tear down this wall," and they actually made a mock Berlin Wall that you could actually take part in helping bring down. And so I'm in a news class, and I pitched this story to my teacher, and she kind of goes all on me like, they need to know that it wasn't just. Ronald Reagan was just one part of it. He wasn't the major part. There was also the Pope and all this other stuff. I guess she thought I didn't know that. So I went ahead and found all these different articles about leaders who helped bring down the Soviet Union, leaders who helped bring down the tyranny of the Soviet Union. But I wanted to focus on this today because, I'm one of the biggest patriots you'll ever meet. And I believe in freedom. I believe in individual liberty. I believe in the freedom of the individual. And I believe in spreading freedom across the world, standing up for freedom across the world. And in order to do that, it takes leaders like Ronald Reagan, like Margaret Thatcher, like John Paul during the Cold War, who instead of cowering in fear to the Soviet Union of the time, they stood up against it. They stood up and stood for liberty. They stood for liberty across the world. And I wanted to focus on that today. So I'm going to start by reading from CBSNews.com. And it talks about it. On anniversary of Wall's demise, German Chancellor Angela Merkel thanks former Soviet leader for his role in historic movement. It's from CBSNews.com and the Associated Press. Chancellor Angela Merkel and former Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev crossed a former fortified border on Monday to cheers of Gorby, Gorby, as a throng of grateful Germans recalled the night 20 years ago that the Berlin Wall gave way to their desire for freedom and unity. Within moments of a confused announcement on November 9, 1989, that East Germany was lifting travel restrictions, hundreds of people streamed into the enclave that was West Berlin, making a pivotal moment in the collapse of communism in Europe. So if you know anything about the history of Germany, the history of Europe, after World War II, Germany was split in half, East Germany and West Germany. East Germany was controlled by the Soviet Union. West Germany, originally controlled by the United States of America. And what happened is, basically, the Soviet Union, communism, didn't work. So what happened is people from East Germany were flocking. They were flocking to West Germany to get a taste of freedom because they knew that they were going to live under tyranny and oppression if they stayed in East Germany. So what happened? The Soviet Union ended up building a wall, not to keep people out. Usually you build a wall to keep people out and to keep your state sovereign. No, they didn't build a wall to keep people out. They built a wall to keep people in. See, they wanted to show the world that, communism could work, but it wasn't working. So they were forcing people in East Germany to stay in. The guards were there to force people from fleeing, force people from leaving. The people didn't even have the freedom to leave their own country. While West Germany, and then later on through the decades, West Germany thrived. West Germany's economy boomed. West Germany had business going. And in East Germany, well, they had long waiting lines to get a pair of shoes. And what happened is in the 80s, remarkable leaders like Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher and Pope John Paul, among others, stood up for freedom. Instead of trying to negotiate with the Soviet Union, they just stood up and said, communism does not work, tyranny does not work, freedom and capitalism is what works. And they stood up against them. And today was the 20th anniversary of when the Berlin Wall fell, which was one of the first steps in the eventual collapse of the Soviet Union itself. To continue on with this, Merkel, who grew up in East Germany, was one of thousands to cross that night, recalled that before the joy of freedom came, many people suffered. So the current leader of Germany, kind of like the president of Germany, she was a part of East Germany, and she was allowed to go to West Berlin. She lauded Gorbachev, with whom she shared an umbrella amid a crush of hundreds, eager for a glimpse of the man many still consider a hero for his role in pushing reform in the Soviet Union. Gorbachev was basically the Soviet Union leader during this time. We always knew that something had to happen, so that more could change here, she said. You made this possible. You courageously let things happen, and that was much more than we could expect, she told Gorbachev in front of several hundred people gathered in a light drizzle on the bridge over railway lines. So today, I'm just going to highlight those leaders who stood up in the face of oppression, in the face of tyranny of the Soviet Union, to eventually bring freedom to much of Europe that was under what was called the Iron Curtain. And I'm going to start this show by playing the speech from Ronald Reagan, one of the pivotal moments that started it all, when Reagan went over in front of the Berlin Wall, and when people told him not to, people said, don't do it, don't make the Soviet Union mad, they could beat us. He went over there and he said, tear down this wall. Tear down this wall of oppression. And so I'm going to play that speech here. I have a recording of it. And just sort of to commemorate the memory of the falling of the Berlin Wall.
We come to Berlin, we American presidents, because it's our duty to speak in this place of freedom. But I must confess, we're drawn here by other things as well, by the feeling of history in this city, more than 500 years older than our own nation, by the beauty of the Grunwald and the Tiergarten, most of all, by your courage and determination. Perhaps the composer Paul Linke understood something about American presidents. You see, like so many presidents before me, I come here today because wherever I go, whatever I do, ich hab noch keinen Koffer in Berlin. Behind me stands a wall that encircles the free sectors of this city, part of a vast system of barriers that divides the entire continent of Europe. From the Baltic south, those barriers cut across Germany in a gash of barbed wire, concrete, dog runs, and guard towers. Farther south, there may be no visible, no obvious wall, but there remain armed guards and checkpoints all the same. Still a restriction on the right to travel. Still an instrument to impose upon ordinary men and women the will of a totalitarian state.